I'm 6 years old and I live in Melbourne, Australia. I have idiopathic Ketotic hypoglycemia. My mom's going to tell you my story.
I'm Anna's mum, Leah. Anders is my second child. He arrived by elective C-section in January 2016. He stopped breathing at 40 minutes old. As we watched them work on him, a code blue was called and he was rushed to NICU. My mother's instinct has been screaming at me since this moment that something is not right with Anders. This is our story and our fight to get answers for Anders. After the code blue, he was admitted to NICU. He kept vomiting up his feeds. After a couple of days on a drip, he started drinking. All tests were fine and we were discharged home on reflux medication. Nate, which is Anders' older brother, had severe laryngomalacia, which is a floppy larynx. He required surgery for this. Anders also had this, but his was mild, and for a while we thought all his issues were related to this. Feeding Anders became very difficult. Sometimes he would be really starving, and then other days he wouldn't want to drink at all. And he would vomit at random times, not just after a feed, like normal reflux. He was so inconsistent. Anders started to lose weight. Our GP sent us to emergency. After 2 days in hospital, we came home and continued struggling along. He made no sense. This inconsistent feeding continued. He would lose weight and become dehydrated from not drinking or from vomiting. When he was in hospital, he required a drip to be put in or an NG tube. Then he would perk up and we would go home. This happened over and over again. These admissions were exhausting mentally and physically. When they did tests, the days in hospital turned into weeks and months. Our longest admission was 3 months long. He was always worse at home. We guessed because he had the NG tube in hospital. I was still attempting to work and study, and the family was split. It was quite hard. I decided to change hospitals to get some fresh eyes. His new team really wanted to help, and they thought of everything they could, but test after test came back negative, and this just continued. Anders used to scream and cry for bananas to eat all the time, like he would beg us for one, and then he'd shove it in so quickly that he didn't even have time to chew it. When he was around 2, he was unwell again, and he wanted a banana. We gave him one, and he ate it so fast that he was gagging and choking. We had to give it to him in little bits so that he wouldn't vomit. He then vomited it all back up again, and then he began to madly start picking up the vomited bits of banana and started shoving them back in his mouth again. We took it off him and he was just beside himself. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. At this point, I was grabbing the bags to head to hospital when my sister-in-law, who was also a diabetic, said I'll check his sugars. He had high ketones. I had no idea what this even meant, but this was the first time in 2.5 years that his sugars or ketones had actually been checked. We turned up to ED and I told them that we had checked them. The nurse then checked his again. I don't know what levels they were because at the time I had no understanding of the numbers, but I remember the nurse's face, and then she quickly ran out of the room and we were taken into resus. When I was asked by the doctors what's wrong with him, I just kind of said, we don't know. He just kind of crashes or does this when he gets sick. My heart breaks at the thought of my poor little boy having such low blood sugars for 2.5 years that his body was telling him to actually eat his own vomit. He couldn't talk and he couldn't tell me. I feel so horrible about it, but then when I think about it, even when we knew about the low blood sugars, they still dismissed us time and time again. It was at this admission we saw endocrinology, and a referral was sent off to metabolics. This referral was lost once. Then the next time, someone had called up and told them that Anders didn't need to be seen. The third time, a message from metabolics was not passed on through the team to me, and so he wasn't booked in. Anders didn't see the metabolic team until he was 5 years old. This is nearly 3 years after he was being told that he needs to see the metabolic team. He presents as a metabolic kid. We did a planned hypo study and he failed miserably, or you could say he passed, I guess. 4 new IV lines, way too many blood sugars to count. He barely dropped below 2.5. We have no idea why, and it was the most frustrating admission of our life. The following day, an hour after having lunch, he dropped down to 2. Unfortunately, they had their test results, and from this point on, I was told over and over again that he doesn't need a nighttime feed and that he's safe to go over 12 hours without eating. There is no need for any admission before any surgeries, and it just continued. This test was meant to be a positive one, and it was meant to give us some answers, but now it was just working against us. Comments from medical staff that we got when we talked about ketotic hypoglycemia included, "What, he's had it once in his life and now you say that he has it?" This is not uncommon. We see multiple children a week with this. "He just needs some fat on him." "Oh, so he needs some insulin?" "Ketones don't matter. Don't even check them." "Just don't check any of them and he'll be fine. Only treat him if he falls below 2.8. Anders went home with his NG tube, and he had it for a couple of years. Then we went to a peg. It was really good, except it didn't come without its issues. There were lots of infections at the start, and then the team then used it against us in the end. We had to keep presenting to ED the same as we ever did before. Instead of a baby, I was now carrying a skinny, nearly unconscious toddler into the emergency room and then taken into resus. Pediatric resus. I wish the place never was needed. Children have to be so critically unwell or injured to come into these bays. It's a place that you see in nightmares. A place where labels on the cupboards read heartbreaking things like pediatric bereavement kits, intubation kits, and life support equipment. It's such a cold place. It's not like any other emergency room with the bright coloured walls. Parents' lives are changed forever in this room. When you're in there, you start to think, why are we even in here? How did our life become part of this? Ketotic hypoglycemia does. The part about ketotic hypoglycemia that is most frustrating is that no one believes you. Anders was so critically unwell that paramedics had to call the MICA for backup, and he required a resus admission. Then on the ward, when his team came up to visit, he was a firecracker. He was eating breakfast, he was cracking jokes, he was running up and down the hall having races. And then they say, he doesn't need to be here, he can go home. Not once had his team ever seen that critically ill Anders in resus. They think he doesn't exist. Because how possibly could a child that would be so critically ill and be in resus be able to run around the halls of the hospital? A kid with ketotic hypoglycemia can. It was so hard to work with medical professionals who don't understand ketotic hypoglycemia. And I have so much respect for the ones that use parents as resources to learn. To protect my baby, I found out everything there was to know. I read every study, every article, every story there was to know. I asked questions that doctors couldn't answer, and some of them didn't like it. But that's not my problem. I have watched my child suffer, and I suffered. I wasn't rude, but I made it clear that I was over my son not getting the care he deserved. We changed teams again. Some of my teams are the ones from the very beginning, and I'm so grateful for their support, and they understand what we've been through. It got to the point that because all the tests had come back negative, that they were talking about removing the peg and not doing blood sugar testing. We were not being believed, yet the hypos were getting worse and worse. I was scared when I put him to bed at night, and I was worried he wouldn't wake up in the morning, or that we'd be in an ambulance by 7 a.m. I knew they were going to call child protection because of the questions they were asking. They still hadn't seen him in resus, and I knew we still didn't have a reason for why these were happening. They refused to refer us to genetics, and I still hadn't heard from metabolics. I was holding on to hope that this metabolics appointment would be soon. Every appointment I went to, I would ask them for an emergency plan and would ask them when the metabolic appointment would be. It was so hard to get any help in an emergency without the plan. The closest plan I could find was a plan used for Russell Silver syndrome. It was essentially the same as ketotic hypoglycemia, and this condition actually fit Anders, except for he was too tall, and we looked into it. I used this as a guide, but made it very clear that he didn't have it, but for the first time, the emergency staff understood and could follow. I was desperate, and we kept getting refused this simple thing as a plan, and it saved me having to explain it all while he was so sick, but the doctor still didn't realise this. Even something as simple as do not give him insulin. His next hypo happened 3 weeks later, just before his 5th birthday. We were up in hospital and they said they were going to keep us for a couple of days. Metabolics arrived. I was so shocked, but I was also really excited to talk to professionals who actually understood him. And finally, I'd hope for his future. Half an hour after they left, Child Protection came into the hospital room. It's like I'm struggling at sea, and I've come up for air and I've screamed for help. Instead of throwing me a life ring, they pushed me back under the water with their foot. I started doubting myself. Maybe I am crazy. Maybe this is all in my head. I gave up. I wanted to fall under the water and stop fighting. What's the point? They're never going to realise. Maybe Anders needs to be put in somebody else's care. These events would still keep happening and then maybe they'll finally realise. There was a team meeting and I got my emergency plan. I had been waiting for this. Years I'd been asking for this. Why did they only do it when Child Protection were called? Who is going to help my son if they think I'm doing this to him? No one. He's still going to be suffering and there is nothing I can do about it. They have attacked and questioned the only defence I ever had. That was that I am a good mum and that I'm fighting for my son. I had nothing left. They had broken me, and if they believed that I was capable of all these things, how long until everybody else in my life did too? I felt alone, more alone than I'd ever felt before. We were still in hospital. Nurses would stop talking when they came past. I was being talked about and judged by people who I'd got to know personally. It was awful. The pain I felt in my heart and my stomach was unbearable. Had I fought this long just to end up defeated? How could they blame me? They were the ones that were playing with his life. They stopped his peg feeds and I was not allowed to use it. But I could take him home. This was only because most of the things they had accused me of I could prove were inaccurate by emails that I'd sent. And professionals that trusted me spoke up for me, and I'll be forever grateful for them. At home, I turned my phone off and laid on my bed and cried for hours and hours, wishing it was a bad dream. The next morning I woke up and decided this could be a good thing. We might get some support. I was going to fight this. I wasn't guilty, and I was going to tell everybody about it. I'm not guilty. People need to realise that this is what the system does to undiagnosed children and their families. I said, do whatever you want. You will see that it's not me. I'm trying to help him. Someone actually came to our house to supervise meals. After being there a minute, she told me I was an amazing mum and that she didn't know why she was here. She knew I was doing the best I could. She sent the report to Child Protection. In the 7 months that Child Protection were involved, Anders ended up in resus 7 times and had to be admitted to hospital each time. 3 of these hypos, he wasn't even in my care at the time, making it impossible for me to have done anything to cause them. Child Protection closed and deemed Anders' issues medical. Surprise, surprise. I think the worst part about them contacting Child Protection was that by doing this, they dismissed everything we had been through over the last 6 years. The pain, trauma, stress, even the financial cost. Anders' father and I separated, not just because of Anders' condition, but it was a really stressful time. Anders and I were in and out of hospital, and they were at home with Nate. We didn't get that quality family time. We both had different coping mechanisms, and it's hard to help each other when you're both struggling yourself. Anders' brother was 3 when Anders was born. This was the time in his life he really needed help with his development. I forever regret that I wasn't there in his life when he really needed it the most. At the drop of the hat, he was sent to friends' houses or grandparents' houses, and it was really hard on him, though he has turned out really great. But it's hard to see his little brother go into an ambulance. During the child protection investigation, I came across Ketotic Hypoglycemia International, and my life changed. I sat there reading these comments from the other parents, and I cried happy tears. No one truly understood what it was like, and suddenly there were others like us. They had been through all the same things. Some of the stories were identical. I wasn't alone. I had people who could give me advice, people who knew more than I did. This gave me the strength I needed. I always had so much support around me, and so did Anders, but this support was different. This support was from people who were living this day to day. Later on, at one of our admissions, I had this lovely doctor who came to see us as she started her shift. The following morning, she decided to pop up to see us on the ward before she knocked off. She walked into the room and she was shocked. She said, "Where is his critically ill twin?" She said, "I wouldn't have believed in this if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes." My heart sank, and I said, "This is exactly why child protection has been called. This is exactly why they want to stop testing his blood. ED and the team do not see the same child." Later that day, I got a call from the metabolic department, and I was told that they wanted to see Anders, but somehow the appointment wasn't made. I don't know what happened, but it was pretty convenient timing that the appointment time wasn't handed over, especially due to child protection being contacted. I've seen all of this slowly break my child, and it hurts so much that as his mum, I cannot protect him from the pain. As he gets older, he understands so much more and is able to verbalise what he's feeling, and I think that makes it harder too. He has anxiety, and when he feels sick, he's scared to tell me because it means he might have to go to hospital. This little boy has begged me not to hold him down and to let him go. I'm meant to be the one there to protect him, yet he looks at me and I can see the confusion in his eyes as they hurt him. To him, they are hurting him, and I'm allowing it. He doesn't understand that he could die or understand that these tests will help him. But the painful part is he's wondering why I'm not saving him. Why am I holding him down and allowing this? After this, he becomes angry. He's hurting, he screams and he kicks. I've broken his trust. I've hurt him. The nurses tell him not to kick. I tell them to let him. He can do whatever he wants. He needs to get this out of the system. The least I can do is allow him to be angry at me. He finally lets me hold him. He knows I'm there for him and he knows I love him. If I could take away all this pain for him and hold it forever, I would. I have anxiety and PTSD from all these experiences. I am forever hurt by the way I was treated by the doctors who were meant to help, and it will always stay with me. They failed my son. He was admitted to resus 7 times. I watched him in there 7 times, 7 hypos, 7 times he didn't have to be in there. He could have died. They took away his support. That isn't helping. Anders' KH journey is still not over. Thankfully, we've been seen by metabolics and they're as amazing as we thought they'd be. Anders has started on cornstarch and a midnight feed. We got the genetic testing done and we are now diagnosed with idiopathic ketotic hypoglycemia. I was devastated when the genetic testing came back negative, but I was so grateful to have it done. We have a new team and they are amazing. He's finally being managed well, and we are getting a new emergency management plan, one that we should have had from the start. I'm happy to report that Anders has gone a whole year without having a hypo. This may be because of COVID isolation and there hasn't been any bugs going around and he hasn't actually got sick, but compared to what he was having, he's doing amazing. I decided to tell Anders' story, not to tarnish any doctor, but to show everyone how little is known about KH and to raise awareness. I do not want any parent to have to go through what I had to. No parent should ever be made to feel like I was made to feel when trying to seek help for your child. But mainly, I do this so what my baby boy had gone through will never happen to another child. I hope that no other child ever has to go 2.5 years having low blood sugars without getting treatment. He didn't deserve this. So many procedures, so many tears, and so much pain. I want his future to be happy and healthy and free from hospitals. I hold on to hope that an answer will come soon. He is so strong and he keeps me fighting. Because he keeps fighting. Since KHI, there's been a shift and I'm so grateful. And I look forward to the day when ketotic hypoglycemia will be a known condition. I'm so excited for the future and I have hope. Thank you, Ketotic Hypoglycemia International, and thank you to everybody who took the time to listen to Anna's story. Thank you.